Greetings. So, we're dealing with straight lines again. They're not exactly skewers, but they do look like them.
Thanks, Chloe. So yes, in this lesson we'll be learning about the pin. So let's take a look. As you can see here, Black's knight is on the same file as the king. We also have a white rook on h1, and you already know how much rooks love files. So White's next move is pretty obvious. Rook here attacking the knight. Now the knight cannot move out of the way because then the king would be in check, and that would be illegal. As you can see, that's perfectly illegal. Okay, White's king is in check, not a legal move. So Black's only chance is to move his king out of the way. But White's simply going to take that knight, and it's going to be an easy win. So the knight on d4 is now pinned. Now, what we've just seen was a vertical pin. Let's see a diagonal pin this time. As you can see, the black king is on the same diagonal as the black bishop, and all White has to do is move his bishop to f7. The knight is under attack, but he can't move because, again, the king would be in check. So that knight on e6 is now pinned. When the king moves out of the way, we simply take it, and those two bishops, together with the king, will eventually deliver checkmate against the black king. Alright, we've seen a vertical pin, a diagonal pin. How about a horizontal pin? There you go. The bishop is now under attack. The bishop cannot move out of the way because the king is behind. The king would be in check. So that means the king's got to move out of the way, and we simply take the bishop. And this is another vertical pin, but from the other side of the board. The bishop is now pinned. Perhaps at this point you're wondering, what's the big difference between a skewer and the pin? Well, the main difference is the piece which is behind in the pin is usually a stronger piece. Watch the difference. This is a pin. The bishop is pinned on c7. And if my rook had been on h1 instead, then I would have played rook to c1, delivering a check, and then I would have taken the bishop, like this. That is a skewer. See the difference? Here, the weaker piece is behind, and the stronger piece is in front. That's basically the main difference. It's true that they're both quite similar, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether you can tell the difference between them, when you're starting out. Eventually you will. But as I said, it's not a huge difference. Let's move on. Now this position is quite interesting because White to move can move his bishop to c3, pinning the knight, or he could move the bishop to a5, pinning the rook. Now modern chess writers mentioned that there is a difference between those two pins. They call this one an absolute pin. The reason being, there's no way that knight can move. It would be an illegal move. Whereas if we put the bishop on a5, it is true that the rook is pinned. However, that rook can move if it wants to. It's true that normally that's not going to be the case because, Black doesn't want to lose his queen, but they do draw the line. They do draw a difference between those two types of pins, relative pin and absolute pin. Personally, I don't think there's much of a difference. You can call a pin. A pin will always be a pin. A pin is a pin. But, when you get better at tactics, perhaps, it is good to know the difference between the two. Alright, when we're looking for tactics in chess, it's important to pay attention to the geometry of the board. When I say geometry, I mainly mean straight lines, diagonals, verticals, horizontal lines. And also pay special attention to long moves, which often go unnoticed. For example, take a look at this queen over here, which is going to move all the way to the other side of the board. And look at that knight. the knight now on e5 is pinned, and white will take it next move. Let's see more examples. Here's another one. We've got a queen and a rook here, and normally you'd expect white to take that pawn because it looks like a free pawn. But white's got something much better. He can actually move his queen all the way to c1, pinning the knight, and that knight is now lost. And here's another long move by the white queen. Queen to c6. The knight on d6 is pinned. It can't move out of the way because then the king would be in check. And on top of that, the knight cannot be protected, so that means we're going to win it. This is a little bit unusual. We're going to do a discovered pin. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the king out of the way because at present our bishop is being blocked by the king. So we're going to move the king somewhere like here, for example, and now the rook is pinned. It's cute. Now let's see another position, another long move. And so far we haven't seen any position where, you know, the weaker side could defend the pinned piece. But this is different. We're pinning the rook cannot move, but black can defend it like this. And quite often we'll need the aid of another piece or pawn to attack the piece which is pinned. In this case, all we need to do is advance a pawn to b5, and as you already know, pawns capture diagonally, so we're threatening to take it, but there's very little black can do about it because the rook is pinned. So this is a very common technique. Attack a pinned piece with a pawn. Here's another example. This time we pin the knight, but the black king can protect it. So what do? We bring our king to f4, and we've got two pieces attacking the knight. The knight cannot move, so that means the king's going to move out of the way, but now we can simply take that knight, and eventually this pawn will promote and white will win. Now let's see a short game to learn what can be done against the pin, because pins are actually quite dangerous. Alright, white's put his two pawns in the center. That's a good position for white. Not a very useful move for black, c6. White develops. Black plays in the center. And now white puts his bishop on f6. And as you can see, that knight is pinned. It's true that we're not actually threatening to take it, because if we do, black can take back with his pawn or his queen. However, e5 could be a threat. And black's got to do something about that pin. e5 is a nasty threat. So there are basically three things you can do against the pin. The first one is to put another piece in between. For example, in this case, black could play bishop to e7, and now e5 is completely harmless because the knight can move away. What else can we do? Well, as you can see, this time it's not the king which is behind, it's actually the queen. What we can do here is simply move our queen out of the way. For example, here, creating our own pin. Now there's nothing behind the knight. Yes, white can actually take it, but that's fine because black can take back. Or, if we were to play a move like e5, the knight is now free to move because there's nothing behind it. So black could actually play knight to e4. Good move. And the third thing we can do against the pin is attack the piece which is pinning us. In this case, that bishop. So we can simply go h6, attacking the bishop, and the bishop has to make a decision. If the bishop takes, we can take back with either the queen or the pawn, or if the bishop retreats, renewing the threat, again we'd have the option of putting something in between, walking out of the pin, or again playing this move to stop the bishop from pinning the knight. Now, this move is perfectly okay in this position, but generally speaking, you've got to watch out moving so many pawns, particularly on your king side, because pawn moves often create weaknesses. I must say, in this position, g5 is perfectly okay, but just watch out how you move your pawns. We'll be learning about that later. And this just about concludes our lesson.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.